For much of the past 2 years, the Russian war machine has relied heavily on a shadow network of factories producing unmanned aerial vehicles, drones that have become a key weapon in Moscow's campaign against Ukraine. Many of these facilities were hidden deep inside Russian territory, far from the front lines, operating under the belief that they were safe from direct attack. One such site, known internally as the Zhukov plant, was located in a seemingly ordinary industrial zone. On the surface, it appeared to be just another manufacturing hub, low, gray warehouses, fenced perimeters, and modest loading docks. But behind the reinforced walls, teams of engineers worked around the clock assembling components for reconnaissance and attack drones. These drones were not only built for battlefield surveillance. Many were modified to carry explosives, acting as low-cost strike platforms against Ukrainian cities, infrastructure, and troop positions. Ukrainian intelligence had been tracking the plant's output for months, watching as finished units left on military trucks under armed escort. The Russians believed the location was secure. It was over 600 kilometers from the nearest active front line, shielded by several layers of air defense, and surrounded by electronic warfare stations designed to jam incoming threats. Officials even boasted, off the record, that no Ukrainian pilot or missile could reach it without being detected and destroyed long before arrival. But that confidence would prove dangerously misplaced. In early July 2025, Ukrainian reconnaissance teams picked up unusual signals, an uptick in encrypted communications between the plant and a Russian military logistics hub. Satellite images confirmed increased truck activity, with several large shipments departing the facility in the span of a week. Analysts concluded that Russia was ramping up production ahead of a new offensive, and that the Zhukov plant had become a critical node in the supply chain. It was then that Ukraine's military command decided the time had come to act. The operation they planned would be high risk. Striking a target so deep inside Russia meant threading a needle through one of the most heavily monitored airspaces in the world. It would require stealth, speed, and precise coordination between multiple branches of the armed forces. And for the first time in months, Ukrainian fighter jets would play the lead role in a long-range offensive mission. What followed would not only cripple one of Russia's key drone production facilities, but also send shockwaves through Moscow's military-industrial network, and in the process, demonstrate that nowhere inside Russia was truly beyond Ukraine's reach. From the moment the Zhukov plant was confirmed as a high-value target, Ukraine's military planners knew they had only a narrow window to act. Intelligence estimated that within 2 weeks, the plant would complete another large batch of drones destined for front. Delaying the strike risked allowing those weapons to reach the battlefield, where they could cause devastating losses. The planning phase unfolded inside a secure operations bunker in central Ukraine. Maps, aerial photographs, and 3D satellite reconstructions covered the walls. The room was filled with a mix of Air Force pilots, intelligence officers, and electronic warfare specialists, each contributing a piece of the puzzle. The key challenge was not just reaching the target, but surviving the journey. The Zhukov plant lay deep within Russia's layered air defense umbrella, protected by radar systems capable of tracking aircraft hundreds of kilometers away. On top of that, electronic jamming stations ringed the area, designed to interfere with GPS and targeting systems. To overcome these obstacles, the mission planners devised a multi-pronged approach. First, a diversion. Several drone swarms would be launched from Ukraine's eastern border, heading toward Russian radar sites and drawing their attention. These drones would not be armed but would carry electronic decoys that mimic the radar signatures of fighter jets. Meanwhile, the real strike group, a formation of Ukrainian fighter jets armed with precision-guided munitions, would take an unexpected route. Instead of approaching directly from the west, they would loop north, skirting the Russian-Belarusian border before diving deep into Russian airspace at extremely low altitude to avoid radar detection. The pilots chosen for the mission were among the most experienced in the Ukrainian Air Force. Many had flown combat sorties since the first days of the full-scale invasion, and all had undergone specialized training in low-level penetration tactics. This mission would push their skills and their aircraft to the limit. Each jet would carry a combination of long-range standoff missiles and guided bombs, allowing them to strike the plant without lingering in hostile airspace. Timing would be everything. The diversionary drones, the fighter formation, and the electronic warfare teams on the ground would all have to coordinate down to the second. As the plan came together, one thing became clear. Success would not only mean the destruction of the plant, but also a symbolic blow to Russia's sense of security. For decades, Russian military doctrine had been built on the assumption that its industrial heartland was untouchable. If Ukrainian jets could reach this far and strike with precision, that assumption would be gone forever. With the strategy finalized, the pilots retreated to their briefing rooms to study flight paths, missile profiles, and emergency escape routes. Mechanics prepped the aircraft, running exhaustive checks on every system. The night before the mission, a heavy stillness settled over the airbase. No one spoke of failure, but everyone understood the stakes. At dawn, the operation would begin. The first light of dawn broke over the horizon as the Ukrainian airbase came alive. Pilots, already in full flight gear, walked with deliberate purpose toward their jets, the morning air thick with the scent of aviation fuel. Mechanics worked in near silence, loading precision-guided munitions under the wings, long-range cruise missiles on one side, laser-guided bombs on the other. Every bolt, every circuit, every targeting system had been checked and rechecked through the night. At exactly 5:30, the engines roared to life. The sound was deafening, echoing across the tarmac, but within the cockpits, pilots felt only the vibration, the familiar heartbeat of machines they had flown through countless missions. One by one, the fighters taxied to the runway, their sleek silhouettes barely visible against the pale sky. As the formation lifted off, a second phase of the operation kicked into motion. Far away, on Ukraine's eastern border, the diversionary drones were launched in swarms. Each carried electronic decoys programmed to simulate the radar profile of fighter jets. Within minutes, Russian radar operators were tracking what they believed to be multiple inbound strike groups, diverting their air defense attention toward the wrong sectors. Meanwhile, the real strike group flew north, hugging the terrain at dangerously low altitude. At times, their wingtips passed barely a dozen meters above the ground as they weaved through valleys and around hills, masking themselves from enemy radar. Every pilot knew that the slightest navigational error could mean disaster, a collision with the terrain, or detection by Russian early warning systems. Crossing into Russian airspace was the most dangerous moment yet. Communications were kept to an absolute minimum, just terse code words over encrypted channels. The fighters stayed in tight formation, their onboard systems running in silent mode to avoid broadcasting their position. By the time the Russian air defense network realized something was amiss, it was already too late. The Ukrainian jets had closed to within striking range of the Zhukov plant. From their current position, they could launch their standoff missiles without ever flying directly over the facility. The pilots climbed sharply to optimal launch altitude, locked onto pre-programmed GPS coordinates, and fired. The missiles streaked away at supersonic speed, their onboard guidance systems adjusting for wind, terrain, and potential jamming attempts. Seconds later, the jets banked hard, descending again to low altitude and turning toward their escape route. Back at the Zhukov plant, the first warning came in the form of a faint, distant roar, too fast to be aircraft, too loud to be mere thunder. Then, in the span of a few heartbeats, the sky over the industrial zone lit up. The first missile slammed into the main assembly hall, igniting fuel reserves and setting off a chain reaction of explosions. A second strike tore through the electronics testing wing, where technicians had been calibrating guidance systems for outgoing drones. The shock waves shattered windows across the complex, scattering debris hundreds of meters in every direction. Fireballs erupted skyward, black smoke billowing over the surrounding district. Within minutes, secondary blasts from store munitions followed, each one sending another plume of smoke and flame into the air. The entire facility, once a hub of constant production, was transformed into a burning ruin. By the time Russian emergency crews arrived, the attackers were already gone, racing low over the landscape toward friendly airspace. In the hours following the strike, Russian state media scrambled to control the narrative. At first, they reported a small fire at an industrial facility in the region, caused, they claimed, by an accidental equipment malfunction. But images and videos began flooding social media almost immediately, taken by locals who had witnessed the explosions from nearby neighborhoods. These unfiltered clips told a very different story. Multiple precision strikes, massive secondary detonations, and a facility reduced to rubble. Independent analysts quickly confirmed the location as the Zhukov plant, one of the most important drone production sites in Russia. For years, Moscow had funneled resources into expanding its capacity to manufacture unmanned aerial vehicles, viewing them as a cost-effective way to counter Ukraine's Western-supplied weaponry. The loss of this plant represented not just a physical setback, but a blow to a central pillar of Russia's war strategy. Satellite images taken within 24 hours revealed the scale of the destruction. The assembly hall's roof had collapsed entirely, blackened steel beams twisted like paper. The electronics testing wing was unrecognizable. Its walls collapsed outward from the force of the blast. Several storage facilities were reduced to smoking craters. Experts estimated it would take at least a year to rebuild. Assuming Russia could even source the necessary imported components, many of which had been acquired through illicit supply chains already under Western sanctions. Inside the Kremlin, the mood reportedly turned tense. Military advisors were said to be pressing President Putin for answers on how Ukrainian jets had penetrated so far into Russian territory without interception. The air defense commanders blamed outdated radar systems in certain sectors, while others pointed to unprecedented electronic warfare tactics used by Ukraine. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the news spread quickly across military channels and social media. The operation was hailed as a turning point, not just for its strategic impact, but for the message it sent. No target in Russia was beyond Ukraine's reach. Soldiers on the front line shared the footage with renewed morale, knowing that the weapons meant to kill them had been destroyed before they could leave the factory floor. Internationally, the strike drew a mixed response. Western allies privately praised Ukraine's ingenuity and precision, though some publicly avoided commenting to prevent escalating tensions with Moscow. Russian officials, on the other hand, issued furious statements, threatening serious consequences and vowing retaliation. But beneath the bluster, there was no denying the psychological blow. The Zhukov plant had been considered untouchable. Now it was gone. The strike on the Zhukov plant was more than a tactical win. It shattered Russia's belief that its deep rear was untouchable. The immediate effect would be felt on the battlefield. With fewer reconnaissance and kamikaze drones, Russian forces would struggle to spot Ukrainian positions and coordinate long-range strikes. Just as important was the psychological blow. Ukraine proved it could hit deep inside Russia with precision, forcing Moscow to divert air defenses from the front lines to protect key sites. Rebuilding the plant would take time and resources Russia may not have, especially under sanctions. For Ukraine, the message was clear. No target is beyond reach, and the war is not limited to the front line. This operation marked a shift, and in this new phase, Ukraine had gained the upper hand.